Welcome to the Real Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, BJ Gramillion, and today I have my good friend Marck de Lautour with us. Marck, I know him from the Collective Genius, and he is a great friend, mentor of mine, and I look up to him, maybe not physically, but I do look up to him in every other way. So, Marck, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, man. The short joke right off the bat. Do I come back with the hair jokes? Or?
It's all free game. Absolutely. That's awesome.
No, good to be here, mate. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marck is in Dallas right now at a conference, and he was generous enough to text me last night and said that he was going to make it happen. So can't thank you enough. I know that you're a busy guy, but Marck, I want to jump right in. I know people probably noticed the accent right away, and they're like, okay, where's this guy from? So maybe tell us where you're from, some of your background, family, and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Born and raised in New Zealand, born in Christchurch in the South Island. And then at the age of 8, moved up to Auckland, which is the big city. At the time had about 1 million people. I think there are over 2 million now, but there's only 5 million people in New Zealand. So when you grow up in New Zealand, you're kind of taught at a young age, or you realize at a young age at least, that New Zealand's a very small place, and you start looking outwardly. You start looking at the rest of the world as options. I was a pretty decent tennis player, nationally ranked, and had the option to come over to the United States on an athletic scholarship. So straight out of high school, got a scholarship to the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and had a great 5 years there. I was in an accelerated MBA program, so I got my undergrad and my MBA in just 5 years.
Wow.
And then while I was getting my MBA, flipped a house, and kind of after that it was off to the races. I've never really had a job. I've always just kind of done my own thing. So I don't know if you want to call me a serial entrepreneur. I'm really just a guy that kind of didn't like working for other people and tried my own thing.
Yeah, I think we're cut from the same cloth in that regard. But yeah, the New Zealand aspect of it. So Marck, he has a lot of talents. And the more that I get to know him, the more I'm like, oh, really? You do that too? And he doesn't just do it. He typically does it at a very high level. Marck never does anything, halfway. And so I know that you mentioned that, tennis, you've not brought up the fact that you're also an incredible golfer, from what I hear, because I don't play golf. But tell us a little bit about your golf game.
Yeah, I was, didn't really play growing up. My father did, and he obviously introduced me to it. So, I'd swung a club and I could, shoot 100, but I never really played. And then going through college, it was my relationships with the college golf guys on the college golf team that really kind of spurred my interest. And tennis and golf translate way better than baseball to golf. My son's a great baseball player, but finishes on his right leg, whereas golf, you're meant to finish on your left with the weight transfer, and it's very similar to the forehand stroke of the tennis forehand. So it came pretty naturally to me. I got to be a scratch golfer in a couple of years, and once you get down, you don't really go back up. So I enjoy it, play a couple times a week if I can. Recently put a simulator in my house because in Kansas City, it is extremely cold and not golf weather for about 4 or 5 months of the year. So now I get to play year round, which is kind of fun.
Man, that's so cool. And then how many kids do you have again?
I have 2. We went boy, girl, stop. My daughter likes to say once we got perfection, we just stopped. Jackson is now 17. Aubrey's about to turn 15. So he's mad keen on baseball. Aubrey is just loves life. She's into volleyball and has great friendships and it's a fun time.
That's awesome. And then the other thing that I thought was super interesting too. I know with your family, you mentioned that your brother, I believe it is an actor, correct?
Yes, my youngest brother. I don't know if you've read. I'd encourage. I know a lot of your audience will be book readers. One of the fun ones for me, kind of a non-business book that I read one time, was called The Birth Order Book by Dr. Kevin Lehman, and it talks about. And BJ, you have a big family. It'll be interesting for you to kind of go through and see your children's traits as well as how you fit into it with your siblings. But It was we played out I'm number two of four, the classic middle child, always wanting to keep up with my older brother. Aggressive, go getter. Doesn't take no for an answer kind of thing. Always just trying to, good is never good enough. My younger brother, the actor, was, kind of, if you look down the Hollywood who's who, I think Brad Pitt, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, like all those guys, Jim Carrey, all of the flamboyant actors are typically youngest born. Because to get the
Wow.
attention of their family and everything, they're having to be creative and think, more with their artistic side. And so he was the one that made us all laugh and cry and just a happy-go-lucky kid. And he just had a passion for acting at a very young age. He was on stage. My parents actually, I haven't really talked about this before. My parents were amateur actors. They performed at just a local, like a Broadway style stage production at a very small scale, just in the local community.
Yeah.
I remember my father being Lancelot in Camelot, and we would go along and watch his shows and productions. And they did My Fair Lady and The Pajama Game and all these Broadway shows. And so I think my youngest brother pretty, obviously got inspired by that, and he started going in stage productions at a young age, and obviously that then translated to a scholarship. He was the lead in his high school dramatic shows, and then got into scholarship to New York, and came over to AMDA, which is the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. And from there, he was able to parlay that into some pretty good success, both on TV and in film.
Wow. Yeah, guys. So Mark is clearly, he's got an amazing family, amazing background. And it's interesting because last year was kind of a wild year for a lot of us in real estate. There weren't a whole lot of people that were spared, I think that it was well deserved. I think that a lot of us were on our high horses after 2021. Being one of the greatest years of all time, as far as it just popping like crazy. And it seemed like all of us were these geniuses making money hand over fist. And then, the market has a way of humbling us, fairly quickly. And so it definitely did that to me and in my business. And so the thing that I love about the Collective Genius is that it's this family of, like-minded individuals that are just working to improve in their life and in business. And so one of the connections that I made was with Mark, and at the time I was kind of trying to figure out what to do next, because clearly Arizona was heading the wrong direction. What we were doing was not going to be working moving forward, just because of the market and some other things. And so I looked at him, and he was kind enough, he came out with me for a bit in Chattanooga. And I got to see kind of firsthand the way that he operates, the way that he carries himself. And then he started filling me in more and more on what his business model is and what he does. And so if anyone ever asked me, like, why did you get into the turnkey business? Without fail, I'll always say it really was a Collective Genius. More specifically, it was Mark and Jimmy that really were kind of the catalyst and they kind of gave me that push to go all in on it. And so for those people that are not familiar with the turnkey business and real estate, maybe fill us in on what that model is. You're in Kansas City. And so maybe tell us about like how you fell into the turnkey model and how you got started.
Okay, let me first start off with what I believe about turnkey, and then I'll kind of get into how I got into it. But
Yeah.
Turnkey real estate is really the introduction of real estate as an alternative investment to the stock market. For the longest time, I think the real estate industry has done a really poor job of catering to high income, high net worth individuals. Well, everybody, but I mean, my niche is kind of high income, high net worth individuals that could easily afford to get into real estate, but are choosing not to because it's a hassle. And they hear all the stories of, oh, I don't want to, deal with tenants and trash and evictions and non-payments and all that kind of thing. A turnkey operation is someone who not just sells you a property as an investment property, but then manages it on the back end to maximum efficiency for that investor. So the idea would be you can have investors from, well, really anywhere in the world that are interested in buying cash flow real estate. and all they have to do is give you some capital or take a loan out and put some money down, and then we sell them an asset and they manage it on the back end, so that they can, basically build a portfolio of wealth producing assets that are in their name. A lot of people kind of default to multifamily syndications as a way to invest in real estate. The only, which we've obviously done that as well. It's certainly one tranche. But the negative to that is that you're not an equity investor, you're a debt investor. And you can just basically, although you get a share in the equity upside, at the end of the day, you have no control. The manager can sell that asset at any given time. They can then just pay you off, you earn some interest, and you have to pay tax on it, and you're back in looking to deploy some capital again. The beauty of turnkey real estate is that you own the asset. You get the benefits of depreciation. You get the benefits of the appreciation, and the cash flow all the way through. So, the pitfalls of turnkey are if you don't have a good property manager. Property management controls the two big killers of cash flow, which are vacancy and maintenance. And that truly will determine the success and viability of that asset. So we have just doubled down and really focused heavily on property management to make sure that we're managing our assets to be highly efficient. And we've had good success at that.
Man, yeah, well said. And it's so interesting because getting into it, to your point, I in Arizona, it was very difficult to find properties that cash flowed. They were hard to find. The market has just appreciated so much, so crazy. I call Arizona California 2.0, or Arizona, California light. And so, we had to start looking elsewhere. That's when we started looking at markets like Alabama. We invested in some homes out there, about 20 or 30 homes over there. And then we also did it in Michigan. And really we were just, drawn to it because of the cap rate, and it was pretty wild.
Land is cheaper.
It was wild.
So easier to make a cash flow.
That's it. Like, you could buy homes for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. They would rent for $600, $700, $800. So we're like, yeah, that's a no brainer. But then to your point, it really comes down to property management. So when you get these turnkey companies, they use that term very loosely, and it's interpreted very differently by many. And so when someone says they're a turnkey operator, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, because you just never know until you get into it. And really it all comes down to, okay, how do they manage it? And for us,
or do they manage it, or do they just have a preferred vendor that may just say, there's a ton of turnkey providers out there that all they do is they're a deal aggregator where they will just introduce you to someone like me. And then there are people that will sell you an asset and then have a third party vendor manage it for them. But there's just, at that point, the property manager has no skin in the game, and they're really not incentivized to do anything other than, make fees off of the new owner that has come into play. So there's I will step back also, BJ. You asked me how I got into it. I think it's fair to kind of talk through that story, and it also leads into a kind of a story of heartache, right? But I went through a bad business divorce in 2009, and it was kind of preempted by the global financial crisis that really crushed real estate. Yeah. And so when I lost everything, which is another story, if you want to go into that, we can. But I literally was back to nothing. Millionaire by the time I'm 30, broke by the time I'm 31. Really, really tough time. And banks were not lending at the time. And so I needed to go. I had a really good business and a business operation. In fact, all my employees, stayed. My rehab guys stayed with me and everything. But we needed a way to be able to continue to operate. And so I started doing it for other people. And saying, we'd go to buddies that had not had a big hit through the GFC that were still doing really well. They had a lot of cash to deploy. And I said, hey, look, real estate's on sale, 50% off. Let's go get as much as we can. And we did. We really cleaned up. There were tons of foreclosures, and that was kind of my niche, was buying on the courthouse steps. So I just got super fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. And we started buying for other people and buying and holding. It really wasn't a great time to flip, but it was a great time to buy and hold. And if the banks weren't lending, you had to come up with cash. And so we were paying with cash. We were buying a lot of inventory, rehabbing, and we started doing about 100 homes a year pretty early on there, and scaled that operation and bought for other people. But then on the back end, we were obviously managing it to the highest of standards that we could do at the time, and making sure that those properties would stay positively cash flowing. So that's kind of how we got into it, was out of necessity, because I was a real estate guy. I wasn't going to just pack it all in and go say, okay, I might as well go get a job. I just turned around and tried to figure a way to get through this downturn when banks were not lending on real estate.
Yeah. And I know that you kind of glanced over the fact that, okay, that's a big deal, right? Like, you're a millionaire at 30, 31, lost it. And so maybe take us back to that. Like, what happened? What were some of the pitfalls that obviously, the market did crash, but what else went into that? What type of business were you running prior to the crash? And then how did you adjust and change things after that to make sure that didn't happen again?
Yeah, the irony with mine is that we're actually primed for the best run ever. It was not a business failure; it was a hostile takeover. So I got a lesson very early on, and there was a three-way partnership. So a third, a third, a third. I had structured the legal documents. It was my idea, it was my brainchild. These two guys came in as quote unquote silent business partners. And they just provided some capital so we could go buy as much as we wanted. And we scaled that operation up to where we had, I don't know, about 120 rentals, and most of them were paid off. Well, I shouldn't say most. I think a third of them were paid off. They were highly cash flowing. And then when the GFC hit, they kind of panicked. And still to this day, honestly, don't quite know why, other than greed. But I walked into a regular monthly meeting one day, and there were two extra suits in the room, and they proceeded to call the meeting to order, and very in parliamentary style. All those in favor, aye, of voting Marck out of managerial.
Did they really?
Oh yeah, of LLC number one, aye, nay. 2 versus 1, the vote is passed, all vote. And then they voted themselves into managerial capacity. They gave themselves super high salaries, and then increased the interest rate that they were paying themselves. So it was this crazy takeover that just forced me out, where it was suddenly, and the way you do that, because you can't just take shares away. So the way that you do a hostile takeover is they gang up on the smaller partner. So it was suddenly 2 versus 1. And they voted themselves to have big salaries. They voted themselves to pay them really high interest. That obviously put money in, and there was money that was owed, and we were paying prime at the time, which is 2.75 on their money. But now they raised that to 12.75 on a couple $1 million. So they're bleeding the intentionally bleeding the company of cash, and then they'd say, "Hey, here we go. We're short on cash. Capital call, everybody. You're going to get diluted if you don't put money in." And so I could see where this was going. And so I spoke to an attorney. I gave the name of the people I was dealing with, and he's like, "Ooh, they have unlimited capital, so you're going to be in a fight for years and years and years. Do you really want to go through that?" And I got a lesson in, how not to structure or how to protect yourself when you are an operator of an LLC. So yeah, it was brutal. Obviously, I just signed away. Oh, the other thing that really irritated me was that they took over control and then quit paying. There was only 5 mortgages out of like 75 that I was the only signer on, and they quit paying those 5 mortgages. So suddenly now, not only am I forced to run a business that I have no control over, I'm now, and this is back in the day. Remember in 2005, you could get a loan and the name, and even if it was in the name of an LLC, you just take a loan out. And so now I had the properties were in the name of the LLC, but the loan, there were 5 loans that were just in my name. And weirdly, those were the only 5 mortgages that didn't get paid. So suddenly I was about to have my credit get dinged, and I just said, you know what? I'm done. I want to move on. I want to get a fresh start. So I just took the painful, broke high road and said, I'll go start all over and do it all over again. So ever since then, I've been kind of scarred. And so you walk away. I mean, if you take those properties today, they would easily be a $20 million portfolio. And I had a third ownership of it, and just ripped away from me. Plus the salary that I was getting paid out of the entity and all that. So literally just ripped down to nothing. And suddenly it's like, okay, Mark's got to go roll his socks up and tuck his shirt in and get back to work. And the most painful thing, BJ, was trying to explain that to my nurse wife that didn't understand with a 2-year-old and her pregnant, why all of a sudden we were actually no 3-year-old and 1-year-old at the time. Why all of a sudden we were down and out? And she's like, "But that's not fair." I'm like, "Yeah, honey, fair doesn't sometimes come into it. It's what you know." They have deeper pockets. They are extremely wealthy. They'll draw it out forever. They'll suck me dry. I don't have the capital to chase, and pay an attorney that wanted a retainer of 25 grand. It would have just been a nightmare. So, but hey, look, all things, I don't want it to
Wow.
be turned into a woe is me. Everything happens for a reason. And I was blessed for that to happen early on in my career. So that I could turn the ship around and, go in a different direction. The irony is they never bought another asset. They held on to those assets for a long, long time. And they still own those assets to this day. But I was, just able to go off and do my own thing and maintain control.
Man, that is one of the most brutal breakups that I've ever heard of. Just the way that they went about it, the way that they handled it all the way through. I mean, that is just cold. I think a lot of people that are in business, they, even if they're very wealthy, at least the people that I've come across, typically still at least have a heart. That seemed pretty ruthless. Like, that was cutthroat. To a
Very,
level I've
yeah. And so it,
never.
it took a while for me to forgive them, but then,
Yeah.
part of my faith is understanding that hurt people. And
Mhm.
I knew that they were going through a rough time. One guy had just lost his job, and I think he was acting out of fear. Um, and they were best friends, so that kind of didn't help me in that respect. Although, ironically, I was very close with them. Obviously, we'd been in business for 7 years together, and we'd babysat their kids, and we'd gone on vacations together. I mean, this is not it wasn't an ugly partnership until that time. But people act out of fear, but the other thing is resentment towards them would only hurt me. Like, I think they wouldn't care. They were done. I signed away my rights. So they're like, sweet, now we got all the housing. Let's go figure that out. They were on to their next. They weren't going to think about me anymore. So the resentment in my heart was only going to hurt me. And so it took, a couple of years for me to start, really forgetting and forgiving. But, I've been blessed in so many ways, BJ, and with the growth of my business and, things that fell into my lap and partnerships that I've had and people I've met, that would never have happened if I was still in a 3-way partnership. I don't think I would have been able. They probably wouldn't have said, "Yeah, go join a mastermind." Right? They would have. I would have missed out on meeting all the people inside CG if they chose to not go through that. So everything happens for a reason. I'm blessed where I'm at today and happy to have moved on.
Yeah, and I mean, you're in such a better spot in that, and I'm sure every single way that you can think of, and it ends up being this amazing blessing. But I'm just curious, how long did it take you? Okay, after that happened, and they just said, "Okay, you're out." You decided, "Yep, this doesn't make sense to fight. I'm throwing in the towel. I'm out." How long did it take you to pick yourself up and go on to the next thing?
I didn't dwell. I didn't forgive them immediately. It took me a long time to forgive them and to move on. But there was tears shed for sure. I mean, it was brutal. And it was New Year's Eve when I had to sign the docs. So I'm literally so this is something I'll never forget. I went to the office, again, my office, because they never had any physical operation activity at all. It was just me and my team. But I drove to my office on New Year's Eve, 12/31 of '08, and had to sign away the docs and fax the back to them, or scan email. I think it was faxing at the time. The documents that rescinded my rights. And I get back in the car and just defeated. Like, I cannot believe that I just had to do what I just did. Just gave up 7 years of my life, gave up 15 million in assets. I mean, I just was like, what am I doing? Turn the radio on, and there's a Jason Derulo song on there called Solo. And I won't break out the words, but it said
Please
something
do.
along, you're, huh?
Please do. Yeah, go ahead and sing that for us.
No, it's like, you're flying solo and you're off on your own and forget what's gone on. And so that's kind of, it was like, gosh, like, how can that song come on with tears just running down my face when I'm leaving the office after the worst day of my life?
Yeah.
And so, but after that, I'm just straight back into, all right, let me go back to the courthouse steps because there's a ton of action. And so I was straight back into it to try and go find deals. And I mean, my strength at the time was I was just a deal monger. I just had a really good process for buying houses cheap on the courthouse steps, and we were in the heyday of foreclosures, looking back, and so I was blessed that there was just tons of opportunity. They never came to compete because they didn't know what to do. They had no operational say in the company, so they were just money guys. So they just sat on that portfolio. So I was effectively had free reign to go build it back up again, and now just had to do it slowly. I find it ironic, as a general statement here, that when Walmart has a sale, BJ, and it's like 50% off, everyone goes rushing.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2010, real estate was 50% off pretty much across America. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I would never buy real estate. I would never buy real estate. And I was just young enough and dumb enough and hungry enough to say, you know what, I think this will work out okay.
Yeah. Oh man. So many lessons to learn from that. And I think it's important for everyone that is listening to look at, okay, fear does some interesting things. And it makes people act a lot of times irrationally. And if you just take a minute to just process and think through, a lot of times you're going to make a much better decision. And I'm sure that those guys regret, obviously, making that decision, because if you think about the amount of wealth that you've been able to create since 2008 up until now, the amount of homes that you've purchased and where you are now compared to where you were then, I mean, they left a significant opportunity right in front of them to have this incredible operator. And it's also interesting to me that I think a lot of times we don't realize how good we have it. And so sometimes we take people in our lives for granted. And again, unfortunately, if you go that route, you won't find out until later on, and it's going to be painful. But I love your attitude of, look, next day, that was difficult. I cried. It was frustrating, but you know what? I knew it. I trusted in myself. I went to the courthouse. I knew what I was good at. I leaned into it. And then here you are now, with how many doors since then have you been able to, or homes have you been able to purchase, and how many homes do you currently have under property management?
So we did 250 with those guys, and we've now done over 2,000. So I think I've done close to 1,800 doors post that business breakup.
Wow, that's wild. That's what you guys, Marck operates at a crazy clip, at a very high level. So a lot of people think, yeah, it'd be nice to do a fix and flip here and there, or it'd be nice to have a turnkey operation. Marck doesn't just do that. He has found a way through operations, and he's obviously tapped into personnel and the team and the culture and all those things to be able to run. How many doors did you, or how many homes did you guys end up flipping last year, for example?
Oh, so that's another that's another sore point, right? Like you've been getting your teeth kicked in,
Yeah.
and last year was brutal. Yeah, since interest rates soared and investor demand waned, and
Mhm.
even on the open market, retail sales were down incredibly last year with the rising interest rates. We got caught in that shift in the market in a meaningful way. I woke up in August of 22 with 147 assets on the books at a time. We were scaling up to do around 200 houses a year, remodeling all of those homes. And suddenly I'm like, my CFO at the time was like, Mark, you need to take action. This is a balance sheet exercise. This is not about the P&L. And business owners will understand what I mean by that. This is not about, the just trying to make money on every asset. This is about getting lean. That 147 assets, we peaked at around 16 million in debt. And, we didn't know if we would have to hold those forever, if we were going to be able to flip them, or what that looked like. And so we just had this big scalping of the balance sheet where we just slashed inventory at all costs. And so, when you own a lot of real estate and you make the decision that you have to sell, there's pretty much one lever you get to pull. BJ, do you know what that is?
Sell,
It's
sell,
sales price.
sell. Yep.
Sell.
Price.
But
Yep.
the only thing you can do is drop price. And so when the lever
Yep.
is price, you drop price and you sell, 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 sell. So we made that really well on some, and we lost our tail on others. And Q3, Q4 was brutal for us from a P&L perspective. But really proud to say, we put a rallying cry out to the team, And we went from 147 assets. We had these shirts made up that said "Chasing 90." Like we had to, of all costs, we had to get down to 90 assets on the books by end of year. And no one outside of the company really knew what chasing 90 even meant. Like, are you trying to, get to, 90 homes this year? I'm like, no, we're trying to sell down to 90 this year. So we chased 90. We got down to 77 by year end, outperformed greatly. And then we were able to get down now where I think we only have 24 assets on the books right now that we're currently rehabbing. And that's a pretty comfortable spot for us to be. So we'll probably continue to hover somewhere in that neighborhood of flipping, 50 or 60 doors a year. And then obviously the balance of those, we've really opened up novations and wholesale as kind of an exit strategy, which we had not had before. And so that's going to be a big part of what we do. And obviously the biggest, again, I love diversification. I like the diversity that the real estate can give us. One of the strengths or things that got me through this time period of losing all that money was that our new construction has gone really, really well. So we started using that as our turnkey operation, selling our investors obviously some of the assets that we had to sell. It wasn't just sell them all. If they're rehabbed, we'd sell the single family homes to our investor base. But the single family duplexes and fourplexes have been amazing and really well received in the community. And so that's been a kind of a shining star for us over the past 12 months is being able to sell that inventory. And that's something that we're going to lean into. So moving forward, it probably looks like 100 to 200 new construction doors every year. And we can really scale that because we partner with builders to get that done. We'll probably flip, 50 or 60 homes just quietly and comfortably ourselves, which is super easy when you've gone at scaled up to 200. And then obviously wholesale and novate, as many as we can, maybe 100 a year. So now we have line of sight to get back up to, 400 transactions a year, but way, way, way more under control than, the trying to rehab and fix and flip everything.
Yeah. You made a comment. It was more about the balance sheet than it was the P&L. Maybe expand a little bit on what that means.
Yeah, well, the P&L says how well you're operating, but the balance sheet really talks to the health of your organization and your staying power. And so the balance sheet is your assets and cash as the big thing, and then your liabilities. What is causing you, to keep money? When you have, we talk about velocity of capital a lot, and that is cycling your balance sheet. It's taking an asset that you buy and then selling it. And getting it out the other end. And I say an asset, I mean, technically when you buy a house, it's a liability until such time that you actually can sell it on the back end. So, we wanted to make sure we cycled our capital really quickly from acquisition through the remodel process, getting it rented out, getting it sold, or if we were flipping it retail, which we were doing a little bit back then, then we would, buy, rehab, stick it on the market and sell it. And we had to accelerate that and really increase the velocity of capital. The balance sheet can get bogged down. And if you have too many assets that are, with taxes and insurance and interest costs and expense of carrying costs, if you hold them too long, they're just an absolute burden and it eats into your margins in a meaningful way. We went back and looked at our performance in 22. And it really wasn't so much that we bought incorrectly. We still bought houses that were really strong. We rehabbed them adequately, probably overinflated, just because, labor and materials went up so significantly during COVID. But the biggest thing was that our carrying costs more than doubled. We were holding assets way too long. The interest rates went up and eat us and just beat it to us in a meaningful way. So, we had this massive impact on our P&L, but it was really affected by holding assets too long on the balance sheet.
Man. Yeah, it's funny. I think that so many people look at entrepreneurship and starting a business, and they think, oh man, that'd be so much fun. Look at all the freedom, these guys get to just enjoy life. And it's like, okay, that right there, what you just explained, is a matter of life and death almost, right? For your business, especially when you scale, you get to that point. You can go out of business fairly quickly if you're not willing to pivot and pivot hard. Sometimes it necessitates, to your point, look, guys, we are sell. Like let's get, and I love that you guys had that mantra, that team rallied. Clearly it worked. There was, I'm sure the cultural aspect to that as well, where you got everyone behind one cause. Everyone knew what their job was, and you guys were able to survive. And not only that, but now through all of that, found another business model that's going to work well for you to continue with your turnkey business, because everyone is complaining right now, hey, there's no inventory and
Yeah.
interest rates, and it's so difficult. And then there's Mark over here that says, yeah, you're right. All of those things are true, but you know what? This is what we're going to do. We're going to pivot. We're going to go new construction heavy. We haven't done that in the past. And now it's going to be a big portion of your income and of your business model. And that wouldn't have happened had we not gone through this crazy downturn. So once again, what people would take as like a negative, you had to quickly figure out how to turn that into a positive. And that's, in a nutshell, that's the difference between those people that are successful in business and those people that are not. And so super
Well,
cool.
that
Mark
is
had yeah, go
that
ahead.
is entrepreneurship, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you are, it's you versus the world, and you've got to have a team that rallies around. But pivoting and looking for the opportunities. If I may, I'll give you one final input on where I see the market
Yeah.
right now, because one of the
Yeah, would love
challenges
it.
that builders are facing right now, and the reason that we're moving towards new construction, is I look at the industry and say, man, builders must be freaking out right now. New construction builders that are building homes are in a real tough place where, yes, there's a scarcity of inventory and we need more homes, but banks are probably going to regress and not lend as aggressively because they're in a weird time. Inflation is running rampant. The cost to build a home is more, the land is more to build. So, you can't build spec, it has to be custom. And who wants to go build a custom home right now with 7% interest rates on the back end? So, my thought there is, okay, builders are going to struggle. How about if I went to a builder and said, hey, your single family subdivision you're building, do you have any multifamily planned in there? Yeah, maybe on the back end, we're going to do some duplexes. Well, how powerful would it be for you to walk into the bank and say, you have a contract for all 14 duplexes right now? And he's like, how could you do that? I said, well, we have investors that are looking for multifamily right now that are really interested in getting in, but they're struggling with inventory. But if you could I can sign a contract right now and I'll take all 14 duplexes as soon as you have certificate of occupancy. We'll close within 60 days from C of O. And suddenly it's just like light bulb goes on, super excited. And that's our model moving forward, is to try and work with builders that can appreciate and respect what we bring to the table. Because I think the strength here at SBD is that we have investors that are well educated. They understand the market cycles. They understand now's a good time. They understand multifamily's a good hedge against, good bet when you're doing residential real estate. And then secondarily, we have systems and process and procedures on the property management side that make our the management of those assets at a very high level. We can take this group of duplexes, form an HOA, run that HOA, get the properties rented, hold the tenants accountable, make sure we manage it to a 98% occupancy rate with good collections. And those are the benefits that we bring to the table. So we're kind of eliminating the sales dilemma on the back end of like, if I build this, will it sell? We guarantee the sale, we put it in the property management, and then obviously we're building that beautiful nest egg that is, the residual income of property management.
So smart. And you just shortcutted the thing that people might miss in what you just did there was you didn't go out and say, oh, let's build a team of contractors and let's figure out how to build them and do the permits and do all that stuff. You went directly to the builder that already is good at it. They're already doing it. They already have the permit.
Yeah.
They're already doing it. And you just said, hey, look, let's work together. And I think this is a win-win for both of us. And boom, right there, you're in business. You didn't have to go out and start, this whole new arm of your business. So
No, I think who not how was a revelation to me, right? When you read that book, you realize that you should stop asking how can I become a new builder or what do I have to do to become good at new construction, and you start thinking who could I partner with that would value what I bring to the table and is a really good builder that would build what we want. And I think when you start thinking who not how, it changes the game, and suddenly the thought process is more about surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals that you can get along with and have a good time with. But yeah, could I be a new construction builder? Sure. I mean, we've obviously got all the people in place, but to actually pivot and do that full time would be such a lift. I mean, it would probably take me 10 years of, painstaking mistakes to try and get to that next level. And I just feel like, why not take the builder who's had 20 or 30 years of pain and mistakes so that he doesn't do it? He has the contacts. We can work together and really work in synergy to get a good result.
Love it. And you know what? You're probably the third or fourth person that I've had on the show that's mentioned Who Not How. So if anyone has not read that book, highly recommend it. We had him come speak to us. Did you line that up, by the way? Was that you that lined him up as a speaker at CG?
Yeah, yeah, that was
That was
Dr. Ben
so
Hardy,
awesome.
who wrote the book with Dan Sullivan. Yeah.
Man, I learned, I could not write fast enough. I should have just recorded the whole thing and had AI translate it or something for me, because I was just in the zone, locked in. So if any of you have not read any of his books, he's got several of them. And so I would highly recommend him. And in fact, that's one of the questions that I ask at the end of all the podcasts is, name one of the books you've read recently that's impacted you this year or in your business. Another question that I ask that we've already talked about is name an impactful year that you've had. And I think that 2008 for sure was a big one for you for many reasons. But then the other question that I want to ask, just to wrap things up, if you were able to go back, let's say 10 years from now, or let's say back to, 2008, knowing what you know now, what would you give yourself advice for? Like what's a big piece of wisdom that you've learned over the years?
Buy and hold. I wish I had have held more. And I own a lot of real estate, as you know, BJ. But man, if I had have held a massive portfolio that you could then sell to one of the hedge or hold for that matter, why sell? But knowing how the hedge funds came into the single family game in a meaningful way, I didn't see that coming. Real estate has been such a fragmented business for a long time. The reason I was getting deal after deal after deal on the courthouse steps is because it was a broken, process. They literally publish a legal notice in a newspaper. I mean, who reads a newspaper? That then
Mm-hmm.
you had to go to the courthouse to pull down some microfiche. They didn't put an address on the property, only a legal description. You had to kind of scrape. You almost had to skip trace to get a property address from the legal description that was there. So putting all these things into place, and then you had to be physically present on the courthouse steps at a given time to pay cash and wire transfer same day this money. So this broken process that was forcing these banks to sell at a discount. Man, I just would have bought more and more and more and more. I just was not nervous, but I just, you're young and you don't, you think real estate is going to go up in value. But I only had history books to tell me that was the case. I'd always heard, you talk to old gray-haired individuals that say, I bought my house for $20,000 and now it's worth, 200, and they can't believe it. But I should have just taken that to the bank earlier and realized that no matter what you buy, time heals all wounds. There are many times that I bought a house that I'm like, oh my gosh, it has termites, or oh, it has foundation issues. But if you just fix it, even if you're in for market value at the end of the day and you feel like you've got no equity, time heals all wounds, and you will have a ton of equity if you just wait it out. So I probably would have just reminded myself, hey, even the houses that you think you're a bad buy right now and you're laughing at the guy in the courthouse steps because he paid too much for it, you should have outbid him. You should have raised your hand a few more times and held on to more assets.
Spoken like a true turnkey operator right there. Definitely believes in what he does. And that for sure has been my lesson learned looking back. Man, I wish I would have held on to a lot more assets. And I think one of the things that you coined, I don't know if you got it from someone else, but real estate is better bought, never sold. Could not agree with that anymore. I've used that on so many different occasions talking to investors. It's just, hey, give it time. And it's an ATM. And real estate, it really is the unicorn investment out there. And so I know that you and I both believe that, and we're fortunate to be in this industry. And Mark, this has been a blast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
It's my pleasure, BJ. Thanks, mate.